Hey, it's Andrew here at BTO Range in Conroe, Texas, and no, your eyes aren't deceiving you again. It is what it is on the table, but I mean, there's some interesting stuff about it. Tara's actually running the camera today. Do you remember what you were doing in March 30, 1981?
I was 1 year old, so not so much.
Okay. Well, I was actually getting ready to go to work that day at my law enforcement job, and the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, was shot on that day, and a couple other people were shot, and they were shot with a revolver made by a company called RG Industries, or Rome Gesellschaft, and that is who made this gun. Now, different model. That was an RG-14, and this is an RG-10S, but they're related. We did have an RG-14, and actually one of the guys that worked for us bought it yesterday before I could make a video on it. But in any event, RG has been synonymous with the term Saturday Night Special, and even to a legal connotation. We'll talk about that in just a second. They have become synonymous with the term Saturday Night Special, and there's some legal implications that came forth because of RG Firearms that deserve talking about. So, where did they start? Sondheim, West Germany, after World War II, obviously. A company called Rome GmbH. And GmbH is a big, long German term, Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, which basically just means LLC. So leave it to the Germans to take LLC and make it incredibly long. But they made machine tools, basically, and still do. They are precision machining. I know it doesn't make sense, but as they moved forward into the 50s, they started to diversify a little bit, and Rome Gesellschaft, which just means company in German, the Rome company, diversified into making things like flare guns, starter guns, gas cartridge guns, and handguns. And they were made in Germany and imported as complete firearms and sold up until 1968. In 1968, the Gun Control Act pretty much banned importation of anything that RG made. And so, like many other European companies, particularly in Germany and Italy, that were importing the smaller, less expensive handguns at the time, they opened up a U.S. Factory, and they did it in Miami, Florida. So that's where RG Industries came from. The frames were being cast in the United States, and the parts were coming from Germany. So barrels, hammers, whatnot, were coming from Germany and being assembled in Miami, Florida. And they were still very viable, a very viable company. And in fact, in 1980, a year before the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, RG Industries was the fifth largest handgun producer in the United States. So that's a ton of guns. And they were inexpensive. I remember back along that time that typically $49, $59, depending on which version it was. And they made a bunch of different guns. And we'll throw up some still pictures of some of these. This is an RG Model 10S. The RG-10 is probably the prototypical Saturday Night Special, 22 short, little double-action revolver. The 10S, which is this gun, has a transfer bar safety that's chambered in a long rifle. So there is a difference to that. Then they made the RG-14, which is another 22. Probably the ones you find most commonly are the RG-10, the RG-14, the RG-23, and the RG-38, which was a short barrel 38 special revolver. And most of them are really, usually I try to find something good to say about just about anything that we put up here on the counter, but it's hard for me to find much good to say about how these guns are made, because they just weren't made very well. The materials used are substandard, but they were designed specifically to hit a price point, and that was kind of the idea behind the whole thing. Is there was a market, and ostensibly it was a market for people that wanted the guns for self-defense. Now the courts would say that they should have known, because of the price point, that the guns would be used by criminal entities, uh, and that was a big bone of contention starting in the 80s, right? So in 1981, attempted assassination of Reagan. There were a few other people shot, right, famously during that particular episode, and a District of Columbia police officer by the name of, let me get this right, Thomas, I can't, Delahanty, I think is the name. Anyway, he and his wife sued RG Industries for liability. This was in 82. And the basis of the suit was that RG Industries and Rome Gesellschaft should have known that their guns were going to be used by criminals because of the way they were made, the way they were marketed, and the price they were sold for. And that didn't pass muster and was killed by the District of Columbia Appeals Court. So, but it didn't stop there. And this is indicative of what was going on in the industry throughout this time, right? In 1985, a bad guy robs a convenience store in Maryland and shoots the clerk with an RG Model 38, a 38 Special 2-inch gun. So that family sues and tries to assert a liability claim against the manufacturer of the firearm that they should have known. And this time, it's in the appeals court in Maryland. And that court held that although generally firearms manufacturers could not be held liable for the criminal acts, any criminal act done with their product, they could be held liable for what they should have known. Basically, it's what they were trying to say. So they're not strictly liable, but the liability can be valid, and strict liability for what they term Saturday night specials, and that particular verbiage was in that decision. So, and they were basing that on the cheapness and the characteristics of the firearm, short barrel revolvers, cheaply made, and that was a big contention of it, because rightly the manufacturer said, well, you can't put a money value on it, because now you are discriminating against people that can't afford to pay $300, $400 for a handgun, and that became a big deal. And this went on. It's been going back and forth, and the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act of 2005 has generally quashed that, to where the manufacturer or distributor or dealer, such as us, for example, cannot be held liable for the criminal misuse of something that's purchased from us. Now, there are cutouts for that. So if something is defective, then obviously a manufacturer can still be held liable for it. But the fact that you pull the trigger, the gun goes off and fires a bullet is not defective, right? So that doesn't count as defective. That's a criminal act by the person that did it. So and there are other cutouts, right? And the big cutout is negligent entrustment is what that's called. And what they're saying is, if the dealer, typically that would be a dealer or whoever's selling the firearm to the end user, knew or should have known that the gun was going to be used in a criminal act, they can still be held liable. So unlike what you might hear some talking heads say on the news, there's not a blanket immunity for gun dealers or gun manufacturers against liability. There is immunity from liability for a criminal act, but there are all these cutouts where a manufacturer can still be held liable for their product. So when they say that there's blanket liability, that's completely disingenuous, if not an outright lie. So anyway, um, in Remington, for example, all the lawsuits from Remington, they couldn't get federal lawsuits going, but they did it under the Fair Advertising Act or some state law in Connecticut that caused that big lawsuit. Anyway, that gets down. Let's go back. Let's get back to the gun itself. So, if you run across, and this is an RG10S, so this was made. The frame was made in the U.S. in Miami, Florida, and the cylinder, and everything else comes from Germany, and it was assembled in Miami, Florida, and then sold through distribution just nationwide, right? So, what are some of the features of this gun? So, I'm going to clear it or try to clear it. On this particular model, it does not have a swing out cylinder. So it has a loading gate here, similar to a single action revolver, a half cock notch on the hammer. So we can clear the 6 chambers, right? So we're clear. So even though it looks like it might have a swing out cylinder, it does not on this particular model. This is strictly to poke the empty cases out of the cylinder, much like the ejector rod on a single action revolver would be. So most of the time when you find these guns in the wild, this is missing. Somebody has lost it. That's not what keeps the cylinder in place. The cylinder is kept in place by this axis right here. And in order to remove the cylinder, you actually have to drive out this 1/16 inch pin that's right here. There's a 16th inch pin there that has to be driven out. And then the cylinder and this entire arbor comes out, and the cylinder can come out to the right of the gun. That's how the cylinder is removed. So there's no quick and easy way to do that, or quick and easy way to load or unload the revolver. It's much like a single action revolver, for that matter. The barrel, this is a aluminum shroud that's secured by a screw right here. Very often you will find that these are loose when you get one of these guns because these threads strip out. And it can be, it's not a difficult fix, but anytime we get with somebody wanting to repair one of these revolvers, we're just pretty blunt with them up front. Any parts we find for this gun are by definition used parts. There are no new parts. And paying the time for me or one of my guys to work on this gun will top this gun out in value really, really quickly. This gun probably would retail for about $89 on today's market, give or take, $80, $90 at the most, because this is completely functional now, without any rust on it. So it's in better condition than most of this variant that you'll find out there. It times well. This particular gun times well. It functions well. Double action, single action, firing pin is not broken. It would fire should you choose to fire it. So the blunt end of that is if the gun you're looking at doesn't completely function, it's not at least as good as this one, it's not worth buying it, because I don't know of anybody that's going to fix it. So they're a little bit wonky on the inside as far as the parts. There really is no fitment to the parts. And the parts are available, but the parts are available from guns that have been cannibalized for parts. So I would suggest, if you're looking for a shooter, that's not your gun. I mean, it really isn't. Now, is there a valid collectibility to these RG revolvers? I think there is, because it's an interesting, to me, it's an interesting subset to American firearms history. The impact of the Gun Control Act and how that forced companies to create U.S. manufacture of what had been imported guns. And then you have the political aspect of these particular guns, the RG brand, and then the link to the attempted assassination of a sitting U.S. president. So, I mean, there is some validity to having a collection of these inexpensive guns. Again, I'm not saying that this is a shooter or anything like that. One of my guys, one of my shift managers, likes the snub-nose RGs, and he loads them with snake shot or rat shot cartridges for snakes, and that's kind of his jam. He likes them. He's a bit of a weird dude, but it just is, and more power to him. So anyway, we got, and why do we have them? That's a valid question. That's probably going to come up in the comments. How did we get a hold of these? I don't go looking to buy the RG guns, but a lot of times we buy large lots of firearms. We'll buy an entire inventory from a shop occasionally, and this came in a lot of, I think, 46 guns that we bought. And that was everything from Smith & Wessons and Springfield Saint ARs all the way down to the lowly RG10S. So, and we'll never in life say, oh, we'll buy all those except that one, because then they'll stop calling us to buy the lot, right? So you got to take the good with the bad. And it's just like the car business. There's a butt for every seat in the car business, right? So, again, we don't recommend these guns. We don't, as shooters, we don't recommend them as a general use firearm, simply because when they work, they work, but when they stop working, you're pretty much done. They're not. It's not fiscally reasonable to fix one of these guns, in my opinion. I mean, your opinion may vary. You may want to tinker with it yourself and find the parts and do that, by all means. But the cost of doing business for us, makes it kind of impractical to bring the gun to us to fix. But anyway, the RG revolvers, and they did make some good ones. Let's not wrap before we talk about the ones that actually are good. They made a single action 22 revolver called the RG Model 66, and that was a pretty decent little low cost camp and trail revolver. Don't be afraid of those guns. That's the best of the bunch. They did make a cheap little 25 auto, which was a cheap little 25 auto, but they also made some bigger frame guns. They made the RG Model 57. The RG Model 57 was available in, of all things, 357 Magnum, 41 Magnum, and 44 Magnum. So I've handled the 44 Magnum version of the gun. Did not fire it. Just didn't have the huevos at the time to do it. But I would certainly buy them, and they're actually bringing a little bit of money now because they're weird and they're odd, and nobody just puts the two together, RG revolver and 44 Magnum. But they're out there, and those are worth buying if you can get them cheap enough, just as a collectible / talking point piece. But RG revolvers will blast from the past, from the 60s. All the way through about 1986. 1986, RG industry goes away. They can't afford to defend the lawsuits anymore, so they closed their doors in 1986. And hey, we're back. Our employee that bought the RG14 was still around and had it, so we got him to bring it by. This is the RG14. This is, although not the exact same pistol, obviously that's still in Secret Service hands, but this is the exact same model that John Hinckley used on that fateful day, March 30, 1981. And it's different. So if we compare the two, the RG10, let's clear this guy too. So to clear this is a swing out cylinder, but you got to remove that guy, and then this will swing out here like this. So we have 6 rounds of 22 long rifle again. And obviously if this is lost, and you can use it to poke the cases out if you want to, but if this is lost, then the cylinder won't stay shut. So you got to have that particular little piece. So there's a lot of it that's still kind of the same between the 14 and the 10S. You've got double action, single action capability here with the black plastic. It actually this particular gun actually locks up good. Gets locking up in double action and single action, and it would shoot. And it's like a 1 3/4 inch barrel. I measured it when I did the specs on it before we sold it. But again, we have the same aluminum shroud on top of the barrel. And we have a big old hammer spur, and it just kind of a funky looking trigger guard here. It's hard for me to get my finger in that, but this is a Miami, Florida gun, so it would have been made probably in the 1970s. And Hinckley, in fact, that particular revolver was sold by a distributor in Opelika, Florida, and he bought it from a pawn shop. And they interviewed, I think Time Magazine interviewed the pawn shop guy because they doxed the pawn shop that sold the gun that shot Reagan. And it was an older guy, had been in the pawn business there for 50 years at that time or however long. And he said, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, he did everything he was supposed to do to buy a firearm. We had no idea he was going to shoot the president. Obviously, we wouldn't have sold him the damn firearm." And a couple of other guns that this pawn shop had sold, he got involved in some gangland shootings up in New York. So the old guy, I think, closed up shop because was tired of getting involved in it from that regard. But the other thing that Hinckley did is he bought some other ammunition. He bought some ammunition from another pawn shop, and it was Disruptor or Devastator or some kind of weird brand name. It was a 22 long rifle ammunition that had a primer loaded in the bullet. And the idea was that the impact of the round would cause the primer to go off, and therefore it would be an exploding bullet. Well, it didn't, thankfully, because the rounds that hit the president and the other people, Jim Baker and this police officer, they did not detonate other than, them getting shot, which was bad enough. So anyway, thanks to Josh for bringing this gun back so we could show a little bit specifically, instead of just a picture, what the actual RG-14 looks like. So that's the infamous one. The rest are just cheap guns, but the RG-14 is the infamous one. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.